that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
It's only 46 seconds, but I use it in many, many events, particularly when I do things with youth, because it just feels like it's such an empowering point of view, right? When you realize all these things were constructed and that we have as much permission to do that as anyone else does, I always find that very, very empowering, and a perfect lead-in, actually, to what I'm doing with my friend and colleague and amazing thinker, Jerry Michalski. Most of the bios are online. Well, actually, all the bios are online. Most of the bios were outside, but this was a last-minute ad, so please come join me, my friend. They won't do the walk-up music for you, but I think you can handle it.
Thank you.
Jerry, yay. I was like a talk show. I feel like I'm Nancy
We're missing the ferns on either side.
Colbert. I'm not as clever as he is. But we wanted to supplement this whole conversation about the technologies, right? Which is the now digging deeper into the impact that it has, again, on us as humans, inside our organizations, inside society. Jerry is someone who I have had the privilege of knowing for many years, and has introduced me to most of my closest friends at this point, who are really what I consider to be the architects of the future, not just the technologists, because there's plenty of those in his world. Jerry has a long background as part of PC Forum and working with Esther Dyson, and having really seen the whole internet revolution come and take us all over. But his genius, I think, is more so in the convening that he has of people who not only have a vision around the future, but have a heart-centric view of it, and think a lot about the implications of this beyond just the widget that we create or the business model that gets activated as a result of it. So Jerry often convenes groups of people together and has very deep conversations around it. He now runs a think and do tank. Do you want to describe it?
This is working fine. Excellent. It's called REX, the Relationship Economy Expedition, on the premise that consumer mass market capitalism is having a lot of trouble and is on the high wobbles, and that the thing that we seem to be rediscovering is relationships, authentic relationships, trust, society, meaning, purpose, all the things that we sort of pushed outside in the hall as we ran business and made things scale and efficient, are now actually being seen as valuable, and we're bringing them back in. And we're busy trying to figure out how do we integrate good data analysis with heart and spirit and meaning. And that means a whole bunch of things, because a lot of things have been misdesigned. When we got rid of the softer side, we misdesigned them.
There's a quote that you put on your, oops, do I have the, oh, I just zoomed us. Somebody else did. Obviously.
They're switching, there we go.
There we go, okay, got it. All right, so this is a quote that we asked all of our speakers and moderators to give us a quote that kind of framed their view of the world, so this is yours. So, you want to read it? Technology?
Sure. Technology cuts both ways. You can use it to replace or to augment, or to stock or to serve. And those are multiple layers of interesting conversations that have been happening here.
So what often happens with us, so part of the Think and Do Tank is that we have these conversations twice a month that we're invited into with Jerry. He's often picks a topic, sometimes curates a guest to be a part of that topic or not. But in that conversation are people from Deloitte, are people from Kaiser Permanente, from Microsoft, from Coca-Cola, GE Research, a big range of companies. But there's often that person inside the company trying to figure out how to, again, create that deeper thread to society, that deeper thread throughout the organization, that thing that kind of holds people together. So in that, we end up with these interesting concepts. This is one. So I've always seen the second half of it, and I've been a big advocate for stock versus serve and really bringing that into the conversation. Again, I had the privilege of working with an artificial intelligence startup last year, and we were doing concept development on various apps, and there's a way that you can frame that app that serves, or you can frame that app in a way that stalks. And we end up in big conversations about whose responsibility is that to hold that, right? Because there was a lot of pushback of, well, that's not our job to do. It's the end user or the next user's job. Like if we build the app for the bank, it's the bank's job to decide if they're going to stalk or serve. And I thought, well, no, actually, how we frame this from the beginning is how this will get used. So I felt like that was a really important one. So I totally believe that there's a choice there when I read your whole quote, I shook my head, and I thought, I don't know that that's true. Do we have a choice as to use technology to replace versus augment?
Yes.
No. So go ahead.
You were heading right toward this beautiful open question, then you asked a yes or no. I'm like,
Yeah.
gotta go
well,
with that.
no, do it. No, go for it.
So just to open the space a little bit, I think the defrost cycle we've been in here of freezing in here and then going outside and warming back up has been metaphorically kind of what I've been going through mentally. Because on the one hand, we started off with a really, Byron started with a truly optimistic vision of the future, but then a lot of the speakers who I expected to maybe ignore the idea of replace or augment went right there over and over again. And they were like, you know what? We're trying to figure out how to give you superhuman capacity, how to actually make you superpowered, rather than how quickly can we obsolete all human work. Right? And I had a really interesting hallway conversation with a gentleman from ABB about, well, maybe we're just not meant to work, and in the long run, 30 years from now, none of us will work. We'll all engage in something, whether it's piracy or massage therapy or what, we don't know.
We had a long conversation about that you can pay to be cuddled in various places.
There's cuddle bars in Japan you can go to, the whole thing. You graduate to be like a senior cuddler, pay extra to be the little spoon, I don't know. But so for me, I'm coming into this thinking about the way that systems are built, trying to be a champion for humans, and for things that we sort of lost. Even things like air conditioning and television drove us indoors. Before AC, people were out on the porch fanning themselves, watching the kids, chatting, making neighborhood, right? And the nosy lady across the street who knew everything that was going on, and she was pretty useful because when something went wrong, she kind of knew what had happened. But we've got mobility, we have all sorts of things. We've lost a lot of the fabric of society. And in fact, the metaphor of fabric of society is lovely because those threads are the things that hold us together. And those are the interdependencies. The fact that somebody needed help shoveling their sidewalk or being watched or whatever, right? And what we seem to be doing a lot with automation is, all you really need is a bunch of apps and some stuff and maybe a robot, and you'll be okay. And you can cocoon and everything will be okay. But little of that is actually about your interactions in society and community. So there's that piece of it. And then when we get to the stock or serve part of it.
But back to the augment versus replace, because that was a different, you did a different turn on the fact that technology has this ability to bring us together or pull us apart.
Right.
That I do believe is a choice, and those are things we can design for. But the augment versus replace, I still...
I think there's some things that are inevitable.
Right.
And some things are just going to flatten us and run right over us. There are other things that we can engineer in so that humans are still in the loop. And there are some things that morally we may need humans always in the loop.
See, and I guess I'm just going to keep pushing back, because I think for me, there's a decoupling. The word work has been associated with paid for by somebody. That's what creates its value, right? That I am valuable because someone has paid me to go do something. That's my work. I do 4 different roles on the planet, all of which I would argue are work, in a way that means that I expend energy for an output, and only one of which I get paid for.
When I count them, you're doing like 12 to 15, but still.
That's right. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's maybe more than 4. But the point is I don't get paid really for 1 or 2 of those roles.
That's a problem.
Right? So I don't get paid to raise my children. I don't get paid to write my blog. I don't get paid to run TEDx. I don't get paid to do some of the other things. And I find that very meaningful work. Like, I'm really proud I get to do that. So I think that this idea that there might be a way of which we free people from, and it'd be interesting again if Byron was in this conversation, because he and I debate it often, but if people were free to be able to make choices about how they wanted to spend their time and not be so worried about this economic reality that they need to be able to hit, and knowing that 70% of the people are not very engaged in their work as we define it now, I don't think that that's such a bad thing. And so I do think that when technology is able to, as he said, replace dehumanizing work, we will be too tempted to do that, instead of saying, oh, no, we should put the brakes on and make sure we augment the person who is picking the cotton, as opposed to put the cotton gin in and just make it go away. So I think that choice will be made for us. But as a society, we have choices in what we do with that. My work is that I go in and I help organizations understand where the future is going and how to build more relevant strategies, and we had the privilege of being in a conversation with, I didn't work with, but we pulled in some leaders from GE who had a very candid conversation with us about that they were moving from a CapEx world to an OpEx world, and their workforce was going to decrease at some point by 2/3, right? So the global workforce was going to be significantly smaller in the future. And Andrew Richet asked who's going to retrain those people? And they shrugged. And so I say we have as a society, that's why I go back to my crystal ball. If I just know what the future of work is, I know how to build a societal structure for that. Without it, I don't know, do we build scaffolding for just more retraining, or do we build scaffolding for distribution of income that's somehow different? Do we think about how we monetize our data? Like, what are the ways in which people will be able to participate in this future, in which all this data is created, so much is predicted for us, created for us, done for us? Where do we play? Back to you.
We're in a weird place because a really long time ago we didn't work. Like, we lived, and there were some people who were out harvesting. Somebody, managed to land an elk, so we went and dried it and skinned it, and then somebody had to go turn the skins into in the village life long ago, there wasn't really much of a distinction between work, play, life, and those circles kind of all overlapped. And now we have, work, play, learn. These are all different circles, in fact, different periods in our lives, and the day is cut very sharply between these things, and work is not really supposed to be fun, and play is not really supposed to be work, and we've done these very strange things to ourselves. So now, as we automate and go through the whole process we just saw for 3 days, we end up with, well, are we going to need a basic guaranteed income? And then what will people do? What will motivate them to stay alive? Why would they? Well, partly we have this question in front of us because we're no longer connected in society where we just did stuff together to stay alive and to take care of people, and it was fun. Like, a lot of it was really actually the fun way of growing up, knowing the people who were near you and taking care of one another. So now it's like, well, there's plenty of things you can read online about. Will people even be motivated to do anything? Will they start committing suicide? Who wants to not have a purpose? Is work the reason we have purpose?
It's paid work by others.
And when we eliminate that, we now no longer have a purpose in life. That seems silly to me, but given this strange place we're in, where we're unmoored from our own communities and societies and even families, and we're unmoored from a sense of belonging to place and having a rhythm of things, that's not an unusual
Which is
question.
then I go back to this idea of cultivating curiosity, right? So I often get asked again, what would we want to make sure that kids learn for the future? How do I prepare my kids for the future? It's interesting that those questions did not come out today. What should my kid major in to ensure that they have a successful future? And the way I've answered that question has been less about a vocation or even a line of study. It's more about how we prepare kids to behave in the future. So for me, the 4 words are often curiosity, empathy, agency, and grit. Actually, you were the one who turned me on to grit. Because I feel like curiosity is such an important component to being able to think about what the problem is you want to solve. That's why wonder becomes such an important word for me. And that has now translated into some of the corporate work that I have been invited to do. And we talk about how do we create organizations that reward and incentivize curiosity and reward and incentivize relationship building. Because I feel like if you, again, are able to be curious about things and you know how to build, and you are incentivized to build relationships, both inside your organization and outside your organization, then you have the agency to go create something with that. Right?
And yet, the first thing we do with children is we put them in a school system that is designed pretty much to stamp out their curiosity. It's designed to create the modern OCD, obedience, compliance, and dependence. And there's plenty of things I can route you toward to figure this out. The normal school system is designed to create consumers and workers in factories. We kind of dumbed it between the Civil War and the First World War. We industrialized our whole education system, and to a whole series of detrimental effects. But today we think that that's the only way that it can be organized. The alternative schools are radical and crazy. People who take their children completely out of school, there's a movement called unschooling, which I'm a big fan of.
Which Byron does. Byron's kids are not in school.
Exactly. It's like people think that that's absolutely crazy, and in fact, somebody in your larger community will think you are nuts and turn you in for even trying that. And yet, so when that system fails to work and grades drop or whatever, we just turn the volume to 11. Instead of thinking maybe the system isn't designed the way it could be, and maybe learning is inexpensive, maybe learning is social, maybe any object like that timer can be learned from. You can learn kind of anything from anything. So
we trust kids to be agents of their own learning.
And you want us to be curious, right? And so we're busy stamping that out actively.
I know. Well, and even again, agency, that sense that kids feel like they can do something, or that people inside an organization feel like they can do something, we immediately put controls in and encourage kids not to do that, right? So you go to back to school night now, and everyone's like, you can go online and you can find every date your kid's test is and what night their homework is due. And I'm like, that is not my job. That's their job.
You have 12 other jobs.
Right, yeah. But the point is that it is their job to take responsibility for their work, and it's my job to be a resource for them. So if they need anything, I will do whatever needs to get done to get that resource, but it's not my job to ride over them. And if they have, but it's tough to see your kid struggle. It is tough to watch your kid miss a deadline. It is tough to watch your kid learn responsibility.
Their days, months, years, and lives are so metered by all this content that needs to be poured into them and then regurgitated for tests that they don't have time to be bored. They don't have a lot of time to follow their own curiosity. They don't have time to find their passions. They don't have time to build relationships. And when you collaborate with others, it's called
and I'll
cheating.
push back a little bit on the relationships part, because I think you guys also see with your kids, and that interesting thing about the social, my kids are more connected to other people than I was ever connected to people at their age, right? And my kids can Skype with anybody, and they're comfortable doing it, and they can have multiple conversations going on at once, and they have multiple friendship groups in which they're all in the same conversation, in which we were not. So in some ways, I think those patterns have actually become enriched as a result of this technology,
Totally.
and then other ones have not. So
well, these things, like these little magical devices we carry around with us, are insanely powerful, and they cut both ways.
right.
They both super connect us and allow us to look things up and answer things and make things and build things and make movies or whatever. And they're sort of portable surveillance devices.
Which I would argue all of these technologies offer the same
Right.
opportunities.
So part of what I'm saying is we have to be pretty clear about our intent when we apply these technologies.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
Who are we serving? What are we getting? Who's paying for this thing? How does it
Right.
work? And what does it do to humans? Does it treat them as mere consumers, or does it enable them to be whole humans and live really interesting lives?
Well, and I go back to then how as organizations do we think about how we hold the people that are in it. So again, I had this opportunity to work with this company internally and thinking about the culture and talent side of it, and how do we prepare people for working in an ambiguous world in which we're building solutions that we don't know exactly what they look like. It's really hard to do the perfect scope of work, which is why I go back to building relationships are so important, because they give you then some air cover when things need to be shifted or changed. I think that's hugely important. How do we have empathy for learning, right? You talk about that learning has become discrete, now learning is a part of every day. How do we build systems in that people feel again, that they've got the awareness of what needs to be learned, the competence, the time to be able to do it, the congruent systems around them. It's always interesting to me. We have an email that I often use in my presentations that came from a senior leader at a telecommunications company to his direct reports. It was all about there's no blueprint. This is what we're creating is brand new. Everybody wants to know what the actual deliverable is, and we don't know. We need to be able to be much more what the word is, pioneering, and he went on and on and on. And then you cut to the inside of that office, and it is gray cubicles as long as you could see that are 8 feet high that cut everybody off from everybody, right? And they don't have the right technology, and they didn't have a right of the same stuff. So I'm like, we don't build systems or physical structures that are congruent with expectations that are shifting and changing. So I always look at an organization and say, how can we be more compassionate and hold people in a more thoughtful way as we create this expectation about how you move into the future? Should we open it up?
And let people have more agency, give people more authority over their time, their environments. I mean, people who do blue-collar work, their health outcomes are much better if they can even just schedule their own breaks and schedule off time instead of having the supervisor tell them that they can't have this holiday or whatever else. But if they have that leeway, health outcomes are better. It's like we think that controlling everything actually works better. It turns out that it doesn't. It makes the whole system really fragile and makes the people suffer.
And so if you want to go really radical, Jerry and I have studied organizations, when they talk about transparency, that are radically transparent, right? Everyone knows what everyone's salary is. Everyone's got a lot more control over their time and their work, and the whole structure of the organization is shaped really differently. So the organization of the future, I think, will look really different than it currently does. But you guys had questions of us, or just not of us, but we can open up in general. There were questions around what will the future of education look like? How do we prepare students that are coming out of school that are very excited about this new future, who understand these technologies and the implications of them, to go into a workforce that doesn't fully embrace all this yet, and then it just gets slammed when they walk into an organization with these really big ideas and big plans. And we've talked about it, from an HR or a PeopleWorks or a talent infrastructure perspective. What are some of the implications of that and just org structure in general? I'll just speak for 1 second about what we were trying to do when we were doing Lucid, and then you can jump to the bigger thing. We really did think about the fact that we were going to build, this was a startup that didn't end up coming quite to fruition, but the vision was that if we hire X amount of people and we know that at some point we're going to move from this model to that model, we're going to need less people, how do we ensure that when they leave this organization, whether it's 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, they are enriched and have skills that they can take into the world and do something more with? So what are all the ways that we can empower and enrich and shape someone, not just for the work that we need to extract value for them here, but to be able to invest in them so they're able to create value moving forward? So we had a very thoughtful point of view on that. But
learning really costs very little. And anybody whose capacity is increased is going to do better, more interesting things at work. They'll be more engaged, probably. They may leave, but if you're smart about this, they'll leave for a higher position in your organization, and they'll help automate away part of their job or the menial tasks of it. Automation's not a bad thing. It's just how, like the relationship we have with it, and how it gets implemented and what it does to people. I think smart organizations do a whole bunch of non-economic things that are in fact good for the variety of commons that they touch. They offer up software into open source communities. They do things for their local communities. There's a lot of things that appear altruistic or at least stray from the profit motive. I'm a big fan of the for-benefit sector. B Corps, but that's just one flavor. There's special purpose corporations, limited liability, low profit companies, L3Cs. There's 4 or 5 different structures for this. And what it does is it makes you a for-profit. You're not a nonprofit, you're a for-profit, but you have a social mission that's allowed in your mission statement so that you can't be sued by your stockholders if you didn't extract the profit from absolutely everything you touch, which is what most corporations are sort of forced to do.
Again, I have a debate around that, right? Because we talk about that we're moving from a model of value extraction, which that was the expectation. Everything needs to be extracted for shareholder value. And then there was this value transfer piece where we take a piece of it and we do CSR. So we say, okay, we've got all this extraction, but we're going to take a little bit and we'll transfer the value over here. And now we really are in the model of value creation, that every act that an organization has an opportunity to create value for the range of stakeholders that are part of it. And the companies that do that actually thrive economically better than the ones that don't. So it wasn't that they were doing it sort of against shareholders. I think it actually gives shareholders exactly what they want, which is a stronger company that has actually got much more social capital built into it, so that the variety of, again, stakeholders and economic partners feel like they're part of it and want to work with them. So it just sets up a whole different way of showing up.
I just fear that today, that's the minority of companies. You're not talking about the average, you're talking about the outliers.
I'm a futurist.
And I love those outliers, and I want to talk about what makes them great.
Well, I think he's asking for more examples. What are some other examples of outliers? So Amazon was one.
Sure. Well, Amazon, there's a bunch of others that sort of have different ways of trusting their employees. Netflix vacation policy, and a lot of Netflix internal policies boil down to do what's good for Netflix, which is open to interpretations, but usually works pretty well. There's a company in Brazil called Semco.
Yeah.
If you have an hour, go to YouTube, look up Ricardo Semler, S-E-M-L-E-R. He was the son of the founder of Semco. His dad was a total type X, type A, normal executive. And Ricardo, when he was young, wanted to join be in a band and surf, wanted nothing to do with his dad's company. Dad got sick kind of young. Ricardo came in and took over and started changing things. And now the company is one of these where they just want work done. So they make agreements to get work done, open books inside the enterprise, a whole series of other things about trust. But when you start talking about all these dynamics, it opens up other questions like, well, if everybody can see the books, then exorbitant executive pay isn't such a cool thing, because it just glares from the corners like, oh, okay, we're making this much, and then there's this pocket of money just being siphoned off. So it actually forces some equity inside the organizations. It forces you to address what the organization is making and building in the world. A lot of the questions that get taken away from the workers in the workplace and cause things like disengagement, lack of agency, all of that.
His is a really interesting. I sent it around to a bunch of executives once, and they got freaked thinking that's what I thought we should be doing. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm just using it as an example.
It's an example,
right? And to understand what problem he was solving for. I think what's really interesting is when you look at models like Holacracy, or you look at Semler, or you look at some of these other business structures. I'm not advocating one versus another, but I'm always curious about what they're solving for and why they thought that was an interesting path to go down as they're trying to invent a new way of creating an organizational sustainable model. And so his is an interesting one to definitely to be inspired by. And he's been doing it for 20 or 30 years. This is not brand new. And now he's actually moving into the education sector because he's realizing it needs to go deeper. It needs to go now also into revamping education. That's 100% Byron's point of view. I guess I just look at it and say it's happening faster, right? So the ones that I was just talking about when GE is going to only have 2/3 of it's not going to be 15% dribbled each time, and those people are going to, I think it's going to be bigger. And so.
Can I push back on that?
Yeah, sure.
And many years ago.
I'm hoping I'm wrong. I really hope y'all are right.
Many years ago, Adina Levin called me up to interview me about the future of paper. And it turns out that paper just doesn't go away. There's always some new use for paper, and there's more paper made. That's probably tapering off now. But with this jobs thing, I know that there's plenty of historic examples where the buggy goes away, and now we have cars and highways and gas stations and so forth. But we've never, ever before had software, which I liken to a flesh-eating bacterium, for work. Because it costs nothing to replicate software, and software eats a task, and then if it's cheaper than the human, and humans need retirement plans, health care, they complain, they're whatever. So as soon as the software is more effective, done, gone, and just gone. Now, we could invent a bunch of new ways, and I'm sure there'll be things that none of us are thinking about that'll be common occupations in 10 years, but software will continue to eat away at the body of work there is. And so I think that long trend, it's a little bit like a black swan. Like the turkey thought everything was great until the day before Thanksgiving. Like, man, they feed me so well. Things are great. I got the babes over here. We're rocking.
So can we do a survey? I want to see in here.
Yeah.
Who thinks that we're totally fine, we're totally crazy thinking about all this job stuff? Don't worry about it. It's all, we're going to create all these cool new jobs, and they're going to replace the ones that we're losing.
Raise your hand if you're on that side.
What's that number?
Maybe a half.
So is that the other side? Then the other half is worrying about that?
If you're worried, if you think that's probably not going to happen, raise your hand, because there's probably some non-committal.
So I'm in the minority.
Yeah, well, that's like a quarter. So there's a quarter that are undecided.
Unsure, right? All right.
I'm concerned but optimistic. Yes.
Yeah. Me too, actually.
See, I'm concerned. I think it's going to happen, and I'm optimistic. Like, I think society will be so interesting when that does happen. I think it'll be so cool.
I think we realize what we've done about 100 years later. There's this insane lag between the implementation of technologies, the automobile, what have you, air conditioning, what have you, the inner tubes, and are like, oh my God, we did what?
Right.
But by that time, we've changed all of society around
And that's why I want us to pay attention to it now, right?
Right.
That's why I think it's such, again, this luxury of being able to look ahead and say, do we like the trajectory, and or can we build a scaffolding for the thing that we know is coming?
Exactly.
So that we can figure that out, so we aren't like...
And some of this is impossible to change. So Jerry Mander, in his book, In the Absence of the Sacred, has a page about the car. And he writes, would we have let the car go as it did if we had known that we were going to pave over all our cities and design them for cars, not people, that we were going to pollute the atmosphere with car exhaust, that we were going to fight wars over the raw resources that fuel cars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that we would now separate each other and leave our families and our towns, all of that? Right. Would we have allowed it to go on as it would? And it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Because the thing was a steamroller. But not everything is a steamroller that way, and maybe there's ways we can tweak it, especially if we were more self-aware earlier.
See, and I would have argued I would not have prevented the creation of the car, but I would have been much more thoughtful about the way in which we implemented its use.
Right.
Because we would have been able to see some of that coming ahead.
Right. And what you get is Robert Moses busy building freeways everywhere, destroying neighborhoods, and then a woman named Jane Jacobs goes, wait, stop. But there weren't that many people saying, wait, stop.
Right. But there can be more.
Yeah.
We can be more aware. So will creative solutioning be outsourced to AI, or do we still need humans for that?
That's a place where you could, in fact, really enhance humans. So you could have humans in the mix and really do something special, combining research, combining a variety of things. I mean, one of my questions is, how do we combine deep data analysis with a conversation about sort of heart and community? And that's going to be incredibly hard to automate, because a lot of that will be about our presence sitting next to each other, whether we trust each other over time, the things we've done, the history we have. I don't think that stuff goes away ever for humans. We can make it so that our society takes that away from us, so that we end up in our little capsules with our little entertainment. If you want to see a really good pessimistic view of the future, of where we're actually heading right now, go watch WALL-E again. Or read the book The Circle by Dave Eggers.
Oh, who's read The Circle?
Either one, really good dystopian visions that you can see, or watch Black Mirror, any episode.
Yeah, The Circle's coming out as a movie with Tom Hanks, but it was written by Dave Eggers. Interestingly, Dave Eggers' brother, Bill Eggers, works for Deloitte and does a lot of future of technology stuff. So there's an interesting, I always think about that Thanksgiving dinner table between the two. But it's a satire on what happens when someone joins a company that feels like some combination of Facebook and Google. And it brings it's the conversation around privacy versus transparency through allegory, but both of them are very, very deeply represented. It's not really clear which is the right winner. They're just both taken to extremes. And they both feel very, very strongly about their point of view, which the main character's got to work through until the very, very, very end of the book. But it makes you think about a lot. Because all of a sudden now you're in your real, this was written 3 or 4 years ago, maybe?
3, 4. And
so you walk through real life and I'm going, oh my God, it's a circle moment.
It's already happening. Look, it's happening.
It's so happening.
Natural farming, there's a one straw revolution, there's a bunch of really interesting stuff there. So which is it going to be? Are we going to learn how to run the soil again as soil? Or are we just going to go build barns and warehouses where lettuce is going to come out the back end? So I'm really conflicted because I'm a fan of a lot of the technology, but I'm a fan of humans too, and I'd like us to have a happy ending. In the other sense of the word.
Again, the reason I was inspired to convene this experience is because I think there is this incredible opportunity for this to enhance life. I share Byron's optimism about what technology can do and I also look at the trajectories, right? Less war, higher prosperity, lower mortality rates. I mean, everything has improved on an interesting trajectory over time. So I can't imagine that we would go use all these things to blow ourselves up. But I do think that humans need to be at the center of them. The biases are built into them, and we need to be more aware of the externalities, the ripple effects, the systems of which we are a part. That's the part I think that people have lost sight of. That's why I go back to the extraction versus creation of value story. People were just only thinking about themselves. There's a quote from the CEO of Monsanto that says that they had no idea how their seeds impacted the entire food system. I'm like, how is that possible? Like, you don't get to say that anymore. But you don't get to say that anymore. Right? You have to understand how your stuff is connected to everything else that's part of the world of which we are part. I believe. That's what I'm a giant advocate for. It's what I talk about. It's what and again, when I go into organizations and we can build more congruent systems and we can understand that when you just do one little intervention, it usually has very little impact. It has to be part of a bigger system. It takes them a while to think through that, and it feels overwhelming and daunting, but they're always so much more successful. And then there's so much more momentum that is created as a result of that I don't see any other way to do it. So I'm a big champion for it. All right. Well, hopefully, I'm again, I just want to end on I am super optimistic about the future. I think there's a lot that we can do, but I think we need to be empowered to actually look at it and be agents of it and stewards of it, not just to be recipients of it.
And if I can be optimistic in my own way, I think the more we understand what the dark possibilities are of our futures and the ways we might do things positively for humans, the much better off we'll be in harnessing all these things for good.
For us, for me, there's a big mindset piece, which is why I love Rex, and I love the conversations that you inspire with Rex, and it's why I love that quote that you're playing small doesn't serve the world.
So everybody should obey the Spidey rule, which is use your powers for good.
Right.